Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died. Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. I'm excited because today we get to talk to someone who has a slightly different perspective of the show. She was in charge of hair and wigs on the U.S. National Tour 4 of Cats. So welcome, Mundi Gove, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
I'm excited to have you because I have not talked to anybody who's worked on this particular aspect of the show. So we're going to get into that in particular, but I want to start with your history of Cats. So when was the first time you were actually exposed to it? Because you went on this kind of first bus and truck tour that was before the 1998 movie, before a lot of it was on Broadway, but it only had a few years of history at that point. So when was your first exposure to it?
My first exposure was when I got hired or was potentially hired to do the tour. And I hadn't seen the show. I hadn't worked on the show, but I had to go and check it out so that I could be approved that I could work on it. So I went to New York and saw the Broadway production and met my supervisor who was going to sort of approve my employment on the show. So I hadn't seen Cats. I hadn't really listened to Cats. I wasn't that involved in it at all. So, that was my first, introduction to it.
Wow. So you have to basically get approved. So there's no, you had to go and learn it for the first time, see it, understand what was happening. And at that point, you didn't really know much about it at all. So what was your first reaction seeing it? Were you only looking at the wig and hair of this as a job production, or were you kind of watching it as a fan and audience member as well?
I guess it was kind of both. I think what happened was I went to New York to see the show, and then I think I went to it and saw a matinee. And so when I watched it, it's kind of a lot to take in because it was nothing I had really seen. And then I also was looking at it from the hair perspective because I had some experience doing other tours before that, but nothing like that. So I saw the show kind of as an audience member. And then after the first matinee was over, I had to go backstage and meet the supervisor who was the one who sort of auditioned me to see if I was capable of doing the show. And I had a thing where my husband was, at the time, my first husband, was already hired as an assistant electrician on the show. And I was they wanted to hire me because they like to keep people together. And so Leon, the guy who was my supervisor in New York, and he kind of supervised all the Cats companies, and he worked on the New York show. And so he kind of was like, oh no, I've got to hire this person. I don't even know if she can do the job. I don't know her. I don't know anything about it. So I went and met him backstage, and then he sort of wanted to audition me. So I had to sort of jump in and start working with the cast, and so he could see if I knew how to handle wigs and handle quick changes and all that stuff. And so I did. I did really well, apparently, because he gave me the job. But it was really nerve-wracking for me because here I am backstage on Broadway at Cats, and I'm being put on the spot with actors I'd never seen, wigs I'd never seen. And so I just, I guess I did okay because he hired me.
Yeah. That's, it's such an interesting piece because the show requires such incredible, the costumes and wigs and everything that kind of tells part of the story on top of the job has to be really hard because they're moving and dancing and going crazy so much that they have to make sure it does not get out of place or go anywhere. So I'd love to hear, this show obviously had been going on at that point, so it wasn't brand new, but how much did you get to kind of influence a little bit of, here is this character's wig and hair, and this is how this adds to their personality? Or is it more of this is what's given to you because this is what is been used and what the cast is like expecting? How does that like go back and forth? How much do you get to have some creative moments into this versus how much is just kind of told to you and then you're just executing?
Well, I think when you're doing a show like Cats, where there are lots of companies, you do have to sort of adhere to a certain design, but you do have some creative ability with each actor. And so that's what I liked doing. That's why I like doing wigs, because it's a little bit more creative than doing costumes, because you do have to sort of finesse things to meet that character's, their appearance or the way they want to portray it. And so the wigs actually are very tied to the makeup in Cats. And all the different companies have different people who oversee that. And whether it's a hair person or someone who came in to sort of originally set the designs, they're all working off of the original sketches, but you still have some leeway. And the interesting thing with Cats is that the actors eventually do their own makeup. And they do all the cat makeup but it has to sort of go into the wig. The way the wigs are designed is that they're different colors and different stripes that sort of go up into the hair. And so as each actor learns their makeup, they eventually have to blend completely together. And it takes a while for that to happen. So as a hair person, you can sort of work with that character and that actor. Some people are really great at doing their makeup, and some people are a little more challenged. It's not always, it doesn't always go the way you want it to. So, but it's still really creative and really fun. And, certain characters, you have a little more leeway to change things or work with it. But Cats are not, those wigs are made out of yak hair. So they're very stiff and coarse. And, you kind of put make the little ears go to a point with mustache wax. And there's really only so much you can do with that.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because it's so integral to the part of the show, but it's also something that had been around for a little while. So there is this kind of like mix and match of, I love hearing that, like, how do you blend the makeup into it? How do you think about it from that standpoint? I want to hear a little bit about what were any of the horror stories or any of the challenges? Like, obviously, did you ever have experiences where, everything looks right, feels right, and then they go and all of a sudden wig goes flying, or, one place something happened on tour? Like, what are those memorable moments you have from that tour?
Gosh, I did it for 2 years, so I don't have, there's so many things that happen over that time, where somebody will get injured in the middle of the show, and then you've got to go and take everything off that person. And mostly it's their microphone that has to come off, because all the understudies have their own wig. You never take a wig off of one person and put it on another person. So there's a scramble sometimes to get people on if somebody gets injured. Or sometimes, if someone gets sick and they can't do the second act or whatever. I'm trying to think. I don't have horror stories per se of that show other than that type of thing.
I'm always interested in the kind of the fun, memorable moments of tour. I think part of what this show has kind of morphed into is being able to capture some of the history. And I think some of that is like when you're on for 2 years going city to city, bus by bus, sometimes, split weeks and multiple shows in multiple cities in a week, nothing's going to be perfect. That's the fun of live theater. And so I'm like kind of thinking through of like in the world did Griz's hair ever get stuck in the tire or in the swing? Or did you ever have these like moments where that type of stuff happened where you had to kind of on the fly fix stuff?
Yeah, there really isn't that much with Cats because the wigs are very simple in a way. And when you're hired to do when you're hired to do a Broadway show, one of the things you have to learn and already know is how to pin a wig on so that it will not come off, especially on heavy dance shows, because that's something that not only makes the show look really bad if that were to happen, but it's really distracting for the performer to feel like their wig is loose or whatever. But these wigs are so lightweight, and they're made exactly to each actor's head. They're designed specifically for that actor. So it really is not a thing so much that the wigs get caught in anything, that they come off. So that isn't usually much of an event in the show. I think it's more, I'm trying to think of, there are a lot of times during Cats where headdresses get put on over top of the wig, and then they get taken off during the show. And so then you have to sort of fix the wig back up again, and ears get plastered down, or things like that happen. But honestly, I don't really remember any major calamity happening. Not to say that there wasn't one, because there probably was, but that doesn't stick out for me. Like other shows where wigs are long, or there's like a whole other world of wigs where a lot of things can happen, but in Cats, not so much.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. I want to pivot a little bit because I do think about, a lot of the show has been about personality types and the characters and the backstories. As someone who kind of had to put together through these sketches, these wigs to help build some of that, whose hair or wig really did you think added to their character in terms of like, this is such a big part of them? I have a couple that kind of stand out to me, but I'm curious as with your 2 years experience on the show, which were the ones that as you were putting it together, you're like, this is going to help this character come to life even more?
Right. Well, I would say Grizabella, certainly, because her wig is so distressed and kind of, really different than what an actor would look like, bedraggled and worn down. And, Macavity, of course, because that wig is all huge and big and spiky and kind of crazy, and it always has to be put on really fast backstage, so it kind of is an instant transformation. And the Bomb Ballerina and Demeter, both those wigs, I think, are really effectual in that way, in terms of when you see the actor and then you see the performer.
Mm-hmm.
Like Bomb Ballerina.
I also thought about Tugger.
Oh, right, Tugger. Yes. Oh my gosh, that wig, huge, big, huge wig. Yeah, and always got very worn and because that guy's a really active performer, so it gets really worn and damp. And then it has that big stand-up collar, which kind of hits all into the back of it. So that's a pretty intense wig, yeah.
What about some of the ones that are extremely heavy dance? Did you have to think through, like, I always think about I don't know if they did this in your production because I'm more familiar with the newer choreography, but the Mungo Jerry teaser doing the flips and stuff. Like, did you ever have to think through certain moments of the show where it's like, if this wig is not this way, it might get in their face or in their, in somebody else's face? Like, is that ever thought about, or is this just something that's so well curated at this point that it's more about the execution and the creativity that you get?
Yeah, that's in Cats, that is not a thing, because the wigs, like I said, they're so lightweight and they're put on so well that the actor should never think about the wig, and it should never get in the way.
What about compared to other shows? So I know that this isn't the only show you've worked on. How did Cats compare to some of these others in terms of challenges and fun and differences?
Oh, yeah. That's why I think Cats was so fun, honestly, because you didn't have to worry about that so much. All of the technical parts of the hair, because when I left Cats, I did Starlight Express after Cats, and that was much more dramatic hair-wise. Lots of technical stuff, lots of detail, lots of heavier wigs, and of course everybody's roller skating, so things have to be really, really secure. And then I went on to do other shows, and then I ended up doing Phantom, which has so many wigs and so much hair and so much room for trouble. So Cats that's part of the reason why I think it was such a dream job, and it was so fun. Aside from all the people who were on that tour were so amazing, the actual work was really not that difficult in that way.
Did you notice, I know you mentioned 2 other Andrew Lloyd Webber shows. Did you notice any similarities across the 3 shows in terms of the way, especially in your world, it was designed?
Oh, yeah, totally. Very similar stuff. Makeup that goes into wigs and designs that are kind of fantastical and fun. And just the idea that they're ensemble shows, not so much Phantom, really. Well, it is too, but like Cats and Starlight are both ensemble shows. Like they're not star shows. So it kind of makes the show all... Well, there isn't that hierarchical way of dealing with the cast. It's just like everybody's there, everybody's doing the job. And that makes it really fun and kind of really easy,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I mean, the ensemble shows, and I mean, Starlight feels like Cats with roller skates.
I know.
It's a very similar plot and concept. But from your perspective, it's very different. And then you think about Phantom again, very different, a lot more. They have a lot more in their costumes, just bigger things versus Cats. It's like the cat hair, and that's kind of mostly it.
Yeah. Yeah. Phantom has, all different kinds of wigs. And like Christine's hair is all, down to her waist and gets caught in everything. And, there's so much more to deal with on that type of show.
Yeah. Okay. I love asking this for anybody that went on tour, but I want to hear your favorite tour stops, like city-wise or just location, maybe for whatever reason, whether it was you love the city or you love the theater or it's easy to work in. And then I also love to hear least favorite. So over those 2 years, let's stick it to the Cats 2 years.
Okay.
What were your favorite and least favorite stops on tour and why?
Okay. Well, I do remember one year we did 117 cities in a year. I remember because I wrote down every single city, split weeks and week. So I think, my favorite cities would be a toss-up between San Francisco and Hawaii, because we got to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. And
wow.
So on one hand, it's harder because it's humid, which affects hair a lot. But we got to do all kinds of fun stuff while we were there, because it's Hawaii. So it was really like a vacation, but work too, and just fun. And honestly, I don't even know how they got all that stuff over there. When you think about it, it must have been mind-boggling to do. But we had a lot of fun there. And we just did all kinds of stuff during the day, and then we would do the show at night. So that was great. And San Francisco, I just always loved because we always got to stay there longer. And I love the weather.
Yeah. What about, I think I love hearing that because you picked fun cities. And then also it seems like places you were there for longer, whereas on a tour where you did, I think you said 170 plus cities, 2 weeks seems like an eternity when you're doing like 2 days in some other places. So I'm sure that added to it.
That's a big part of it, yeah.
What about least favorite? I always love to ask. What part of the country did you, and it could be for other reasons. It doesn't have to be the city. It could be the theater was really tough or humidity made the job harder. But did you have any place that stood out as a challenge?
It's really hard to remember because I was on tour for like a decade. So
yeah,
there's so many cities that are just like, But I would say probably somewhere in the South where the weather is really tough. If you're down there in the summer, like Shreveport or Mobile, Alabama, or somewhere down there where the theater's really small, it's really just tricky, and then the climate is difficult. So I don't know that I have one in particular that not from Cats, maybe from other shows, but not from Cats. I do remember New Orleans, as much as it's a great city, we did have a lot of the people on the crew got to travel with bikes, which got put on the trucks. And so we had like 15 bikes in there or something, but we couldn't have them at the theater in New Orleans for some reason, or in the hotel. So they all got kept on the truck, which was stored outside of the city somewhere. And they all got stolen out of the back of the truck.
Wow.
So everyone lost all of their bikes. And so we loved having bikes so we could get around the towns and the cities that we were in. But we lost our bikes all from New Orleans. But New Orleans is a great city, but it had that one negative thing that happened.
Yeah. There's a lot of those where the moment, what happened to you in that particular time can shape an experience of a city, whether the city's amazing or not. There's been examples of that over time. And it seems like New Orleans has had a few more of the challenging moments on your tour and then even the tour after yours.
Oh, yeah?
There were some stories there of pretty consistently. So
oh, interesting.
I wonder if it's just a memorable city or if there's something else to that.
Yeah.
Let's do some Cats rapid fire. So if you could perform in Cats, which cat would you want to go on as?
The white cat, Victoria.
Do the whole dance, do the lift and everything.
Beautiful, just beautiful cat. Yeah.
Okay. Who are your favorite and least favorite characters in the show?
Well, gosh, that's hard. I would say Tugger is probably one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Fun, funny. I liked that character from the very first time I saw the show. And I liked the actor who played the character. So that character is one of my favorites. And then you're asking my least favorite?
Yeah, and I'll frame it as which is the family member that annoys you the most, or like, because they're all fun and part of your extended family here, but which is the personality-wise the cat that you would probably get least along with?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough one. I guess McCavity.
The villain.
Gotta
go for
troublemaker,
yeah.
Just shows up, dysfunctional. Yeah.
Love one brother, hate the other. Okay. Yeah. I love it. Favorite song from the show?
Oh, McCavity, for sure.
McCavity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's my answer too these days. It does change a lot, but that one's so fun.
Yeah, so burlesque. So love the big brassy sound. I'm married to a trombonist, so,
If one cat character was put in charge of doing your job on tour, which cat would do the best at your job at running everything from hair and wig behind the scenes?
Oh, wow. Probably Skimbleshanks.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And he has a vest. So he would have a place to keep the things, the comb and the things that you need.
Attire. I didn't think about attire. I was thinking purely personality, but I love that he's ready to go with being able to pull all the stuff out that you're wearing. So it's even more so the case.
Right. And his personality too is kind of, keeping everything under control.
Yeah. Very on track. Okay. So this is the most important question of this show. But I've argued at length that I don't think Grizabella was supposed to be the Jellicle choice. So I want to hear, as someone who got to experience this show from 2 years from a different angle, if you were in charge, if you are picking your Jellicle choice, you get to be old Deuteronomy. Are you picking Grizabella or are you picking another cat, and why?
Well, to answer that, I would have to answer it from a hair person's perspective, kind of a costume hair perspective. So I think it would be Grizabella, but it kind of needs to be finished in that she needs to be able to come back fully changed back to her original glamorous self, kind of like the witch in Into the Woods.
So I think that's a really interesting question, because the idea of you're saying is she needs to be picked because then she gets to come back as a younger version of herself right away to be with her family, and that's kind of like the redemption arc. But I've always wondered, is that actually what happens, or does Grizabella become the next Victoria, or the next, is it a whole different cat that she comes back as? Because this life is over and it's done.
No, she would come back as herself, because if you look at her costume and her wig and everything, it's all tattered, but yet you can see the remnants of what it once was. She has this really cool fur coat and this black sequin dress. So I'd like to see that revived.
Okay. So because I think something that you're saying is something that the way I think about it, but from a slightly different tweak of it. which is my argument of recently has been, I think she should spend the year with the family. Like that coming back to the family will help kind of bring her back to her younger self by having that love and embrace of her missing family. But you're saying kind of the same thing, but just with also being the choice. So I kind of think pick Gus this year, let her come back. She gets to have a little bit of that. She gets to clean up a little bit. She gets to spend time and be loved and have that. But you're saying kind of the same thing, but she gets picked and then she comes immediately back as a new version of herself.
Yeah, because it's more theatrical. It's more like, it's a more glamorous moment. And I, as a hair and costume person, kind of like to see it in that way. But, it could be either way.
Yeah, I think it's fun. I've always wondered too, if like maybe I guess you could tell me how technically difficult it would be as a costume and wig person. But what if she came back? Like, what if you don't end the show with her going up and then they do that kind of weird song where they kind of talk to you at the end, and instead she comes back as her new self and you're almost starting the next year with her? Like, how hard would that be for you all to do off stage?
Well, not hard at all. I mean, no, people just live for that. There's just nothing more fun than an insanely fast costume change. Like, it is just one of the most fun challenges there is. Or she could go up in the tire and then come back down, totally redone, which would be really cool too. That means she'd have to get off the tire up there and do the change up in the, the fly space somehow, and then come back down. So that would be cool tit But yeah, you could do a really quick wig change and a really quick costume change and clean her face up a little bit, and she'd be good to go. Yes, and then it could kind of start again.
Yeah, then you're starting your next year with the full redemption arc of here's now what she needed.
Right.
That is interesting. I had never thought about it from that angle of where, I always think like the show just ends. It's like the year ends, the ball's over next year. And someone did say a theory that Victoria was last year's choice, which is why she was being brought back in. And that kind of made me think of, when does that start? How does that go? And so that is an interesting way to have. I love having her do it up in the fly of like, she goes up, you're going to stick to the story. She's going to go up there. We're going to change quickly, and then we're going to bring her back down. And then it's going to be the beginning of the next year.
Right. Yeah. I think it's the perfect way.
That might be the only way I'll accept Grizabella as a Jellicle choice.
Yeah. As a hair person, you don't really think about it in that way too much. You know what I mean? When you get hired to do a show, you have to kind of think about the characters and the designs, but you aren't that attached to those types of ideas. You know what I mean? Like, no one's coming around and saying, now think this through, think this character through, and think this through. You're just kind of like, no, this is what you look like, and this is what you're going to do. And the more fun and challenging the changes are, the more fun and challenging the show is.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to hear, and that's why I've loved doing 160 plus episodes of this, is I've talked to so many different parts of the show now. Talked to production stage managers and electricians and people doing lighting and sound, but also, hundreds of performers who kind of take a slightly different angle in the way they think about things. And there is that, you've got to know some of the story. If you're Old Deuteronomy or Grizabella or Demeter, you have to have these key things that you have to take into the story. And there's some other stuff that's kind of a little bit flexible and you can have some leeway. But then for you don't need to know the through line of the story nearly as much unless it's an integral part of that particular part of your job. Like if there is the hair is supposed to be spiky to tell part of that story, you kind of need to know that, because then it helps you build the wig out and make sure you take some of that creativity. But you don't have to think about, does Grizabella, why does she go and does she come back and where does she go next?
Yeah.
It's kind of irrelevant in some parts. So I do find that part really interesting, because I hadn't thought about, you kind of always hear about Grizabella's supposed to look worn, but you're saying even the hair is, looks even more so worn, and the whole costume's built around that for that theory and that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love how you could transition that quickly, because I do know they do a baby Grizz in the newer version where essentially it's just an ensemble dancer, but it's the Grizabella doing that in the very opening number.
Oh yeah, we had that too, but she's not.
Yeah.
She's just in a plain cat's
It's
costume.
not Grizabella-ish.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's her
Yeah, it's just
foundational
so
piece.
interesting.
Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
usually am very more debating when I get a Grizabella answer, but
I
I
bet.
like the idea of ending it differently. I like the idea of not just having it stop at that moment, but take it a step further
Yeah.
and bring her back in anew. Give a fun, quick change that you all can live for, a new challenge in every city you go to figure out how you're going to do that.
Right.
Right. And it gives a beginning of Cats too.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, her wig is very, it's the only one in the show that's made out of human hair. It's kind of like a little bit like Mrs. Lovett in a way, pulled up into these little cat ear buns.
Yeah.
And then fully distressed. So it would be really fun to get to redo that and make it more glamorous.
That's fun. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you were like, a Cats person should know this about this show from your perspective?
No, I don't know. It's just a show that really, to so many people, it really makes no sense at all. But it's really one of the most beautiful shows that you can be involved with because of the artistry in it. And the design is just so beautiful. And it really began that, as far as I am concerned, that kind of style of musical. And it really gave a lot of people a lot of employment and a lot of inspiration for everything that followed. So I really appreciate it for that. And people should understand that because it's a show that a lot of people can love to hate, but it's really kind of, it doesn't deserve that.
Yeah, I think it's an easy punchline. And so it's always been an easy joke to make because it is a little weird and there isn't a very clear story without digging pretty deep. And so I think there is a healthy level of respect for it, especially in the Broadway community, but also with a lot of the fandom. There is a humongous fandom for the show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that have seen it once or not seen it at all. And it's just, again, it's an easy punchline. And so there is that. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of loved that there's been a resurgence a little bit. And I even love that the bad 2019 movie at least sparked even more conversation about it, whether it helped or hurt. But I think it's one of those shows that everyone who does it, it's like almost like a family of like, it brings them into this like Cats family and community. And then there is a humongous fandom that loves it. And they all really understand the art and respect the kind of what goes into it, especially from choreography and just the difference in the thoughtfulness of the storytelling that's not necessarily always there, but also the freedom that they have as performers to kind of add to it. I'm sure you felt that way as like, yes, you have your sketch, but you have some freedom as a creative to kind of add and bring your own flavor to it, which not every show has that. And that's where I think it's very unique to have that ability to tackle it in a little different way. Oh,
totally. Yeah, it's so collaborative, the show. The way that everyone works together. It's a real collaboration. And there's a lot of art going on there.
Amazing. Well, this has been so fun. It's been fun to hear a different perspective of the show that I've not heard before. I do like, it's probably the first Grizabella argument that I've kind of been like, maybe I'm here for this one. So thank you for bringing that.
Sure.
And for sharing everything about your experience in the show.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the Cat's Chats for you. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died, or check our website, thewrongcatdied.com.